With all the talk about the 2024 Can-Am Maverick R and its 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, we decided it was time to take a look at the sports side-by-side that brought us the dual-clutch transmission, and that is the Honda Talon. Zach, how many Honda Talons have we had through this shop?
Oh man, right when we first moved to Knoxville, we had 2 Honda Talons for the better part of a year. Beat the ever-loving snot out of.
Yes, we did.
We took them up to Hatfield McCoy, ran them at Windrock multiple times. They were unstoppable forces of nature. We loved them, and most of that love came down to the gearbox. That dual-clutch transmission, you never had to worry about a belt timp, had to worry about slipping a belt, burning any of that. And there is something fun to just, clicking the paddles and bang, bang, bang. The launch control is excellent, all that stuff is fun. Now Honda came out with a model that we've been waiting for a long time, which is the 4-seat 1000R. That's 1000R-4. We've got one here into the shop. We figured it was time to take a minute to show you everything you needed to know about the Honda Talon 1000R-4.
Honda introduced the Talon in 2019 to great fanfare. It was a 105 horsepower, 1000cc parallel twin that came right out of the Africa Twin adventure motorcycle. A proven engine and transmission that came out of another part of their power sports business, and it slotted right into a side-by-side almost seamlessly. And speaking of seamlessly, it had a dual clutch gearbox. This was something revolutionary for the time in side-by-sides, and it made a splash. We aren't the only people who loved it. Woods racers love it. Desert racers love it. They sold them by their droves. But in the time since 2019, the side-by-side market has evolved considerably, and Honda knew coming into this year it was time for a little bit of a revamp, and rather than go all the way back to the drawing board and risk screwing up something that really works, they just made the Honda Talon better. Now the R is the wide track model. That's for ripping across the desert. If you live in a wooded area, you're probably going to go for the X model, but everyone had been clamoring for a 4-seat rig that they could rip across the desert, and so Honda delivered. And not only did they do that, they put live valve on every model. What is live valve?
Yeah, so if you think back to the halcyon days of 2019, we really hadn't seen live valve at that point. It was a brand new thing. The idea of having an adaptive suspension on a side-by-side was big news. It allowed the rig to do all sorts of incredible things. Adjust suspension on the fly. You just push a button, it'll firm things up or soften things up as you need. We love that system. Everybody likes adjustable suspension where you have clickers. It takes time, you gotta get out, you get your tools out, you get muddy, whatever, that kind of sucks. As opposed to live valve, you just push a button, the thing's ready to rip.
Right, and it'll go from side to side. So if you huck it into a corner where most side-by-sides exhibit a lot of body roll, the Honda will stiffen up the outside of the rig to keep you flat in the corners. And that is something that we hadn't seen before. We have tested these in the desert in Arizona, and that was the first thing we noticed about it. You huck into a big sandy berm in the desert and it just holds.
The industry has caught up in the meantime, however, right?
Yeah.
Polaris, Can-Am, just about anybody out there who's serious, sell you a Fox live valve system.
Right, and there are even, Polaris and Can-Am even have their own proprietary branding on that, so they've gone to the trouble of developing suspension systems that work with their specific rigs. Now Honda's is an off-the-shelf unit, but that doesn't mean it's less than the proprietary units from some of their competitors.
That's everything we already know about the Honda Talon. What's new with the new rig?
They've got a new electronic power steering unit that Honda says has 87% more torque than the outgoing unit. That means you get more assist. Now, we've felt some of these changes in the 2023 Honda Pioneer lineup. It's fantastic. It works in a utility rig. There's no reason it won't work in a sports side-by-side. They've also added a return to center function. So if you let go of the wheel, it's going back to center. So you come out of a corner, instead of having to manually counter steer, you just let the wheel go and then catch it, and you're right where you want to be.
Which is more intuitive, right? Like
right.
You get in a car, all modern cars have a return to center. Either that's a function of how the suspension geometry is, or it's a function of the actual electronic power steering system. They very wisely brought it over from the automotive side. It's super intuitive, it's super low effort, and that means you can ride longer. You're not getting worn out when you're out on the trail.
Right, and the other nice thing about the return to center function is that it has gradient detection. So like if you're on a hill, the thing is going to steer up into the hill or down away from it. Whatever you're kind of doing, the rig is going to help you. So again, much lower effort, it's much more intuitive, it's easier to ride. Going to make things much more comfortable for a beginner, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They also tweaked the styling a little bit. For the first time, we've got full coverage doors, front and rear. That's a massive thing. Look, it was fun to be able to look out the bottom of the doors, but for those of us on the East Coast where water and mud is a thing, it basically meant you got a nice racing stripe up your thigh. Yep. So having that gone is super nice. There are a few more cup holders, a little bit more storage available than before, which is huge.
Yep, and they stuck with the door nets, but now they go from the top of the half door to the bottom of the cage, which means you've got some protection. If your head rocks, it's not going out of the side-by-side. The net's actually going to keep it in place. So that's a very nice feature. Again, something that's going to make everything feel a little bit more comfortable and safe. Before we go any further with our everything you need to know on the 2023 Honda Talon, take a minute, go down below, hit that like button, and hit the subscribe button for us. We've got new content on YouTube every week, so give us a follow and make sure you don't miss any of the action. If you take your family with you, there's way fewer worries than on rigs that you have to buy that aftermarket.
They also elevated the aesthetics a little bit, so for the first time we've got painted plastics, color-matched frame. This thing just looks a little bit nicer than it did before.
Yeah, the wheels on the old one were matte finish, and they looked a little golf carty is the way I would put it, and these are a gloss finish. They've got more spokes. They just look a little bit more, for lack of a better term, they look a little bit more polished. Another nice feature of the 2023 Honda 1000R4 is that they have a new low-range sport driving mode. It's just going to increase responsiveness when you're rock crawling or whatever. Just something nice, makes it a little bit smoother. And again, if you're taking your family on the trail and they don't want to go 50 miles an hour everywhere, that is a really nice feature to kind of keep everything calm and collected, let everyone focus on the ride and not what they're feeling or not what the rig is doing that they wish it wouldn't.
So at this point, the Talon's been out for a good while, and Honda knows what's working and what's not working. For 2024, they've increased the size of the roll bar protection. It went from 1.5 millimeters to 2.3 millimeters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that amount of thickness really increases structural rigidity, which also means the thing just feels better.
And keep in mind that that almost extra millimeter extends over the whole length of the cage, so while 1 millimeter doesn't sound like a lot when you're talking about the cross section of a tube, in aggregate over the whole rig, that's a lot more material.
Yeah, considerably. They also took care of a problem that early owners were seeing with differential seal leaks. They have an all-new differential seal design that should take care of that issue.
Now, the things Honda didn't mess with, some of them we wish they had. Now, understand the philosophy from Honda's standpoint, don't mess with what works. So they left the Unicam parallel twin from the Africa Twin more or less alone. Back in 2019, the 105 horsepower that engine is pumping out was adequate, more than enough in fact. But the industry has really moved on in that 4 years. They took the pandemic to kind of make everything a little bit more beefy, and Honda hasn't kept up with that, and it's noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a world where there are multiple utility rigs that are turning out close to that kind of power.
Or more than that.
Or more than that. And nobody wants to be on a trail and get your tail dusted by somebody in a Ranger.
Yeah, so the solution, a turbo on it?
Put a turbo on it. Give us the Turbskis, Honda. We want the Turbskis. Similarly, Honda left the four-wheel drive system alone. It's an intelligent four-wheel drive system that uses the brakes to shuttle torque from one side to the other. Most of the time, it works excellent. You only really notice it falling down when you're into some really technical stuff. Yeah. And, you know, if you've been hanging around us for a little while, you know that we like a true locker. We want to be able to push a button, know that that front differential is locked. Pretty gnarly trails around here, and that half second of slip can be the difference between I'm making it up this thing and I'm not.
The Pioneer has a lock.
Yeah.
You know what it does? It works really, really well. It's got turf mode and a locker. Throw that in there. Beef it up for sport use and throw it in there.
Absolutely.
How simple is that?
Honda also claims that because of the new steering system, there's a better turning radius, but this is a 4-seat rig. She's super long. The turning radius is not great. If you are whipping around on tight trails, even in the desert, you're gonna be doing some Austin Powers nonsense.
Yep. Yeah. And again, we noticed this with the Honda Pioneer 1006. Seems to be a familial trait. Doesn't seem like it's outside of the realm of Honda's capability to fix it.
Yeah, and you know, we know why Honda has done that, right? Anytime you have a super tight turning radius in something with a high center of gravity, you increase the chance of the thing flopping over on its side. You know, you open up that turning radius, you're less likely to have that happen.
The interior hasn't changed much for 2023. Honda says they've relocated some of the dials on the dash. That's great. I can't say that we noticed. The interior is more than adequate for a 2019 rig. In 2023, it is starting to be outclassed by its competitors, especially from the North American market. You will have heard us in 2020 and 2021 rave about the interiors in Hondas, in Yamahas, in Japanese rigs in general. They were just a cut above the quality level you'd get from a North American machine. That ain't so anymore.
No. Polaris specifically has increased the quality across the board. Can-Am is catching up, and really it's leaving some of these older rigs kind of in the dust.
We know what they're capable of because Honda made super high quality interiors, or what felt like super high quality interiors, a few years ago. So we can't imagine there's that much effort in just kicking that up just one more notch. If we're gonna have an arms race, let's have an arms race.
Absolutely. Honda also threw a lot more accessories at the rig for 2024. They say they have over 60 accessories. The vehicle that we have came loaded with over fenders. It's got rear splash guards. It's got cargo box gearbox, it's got light pods, and they're all Honda branded, which means, you know, they're gonna be pretty good stuff.
Yep. We still didn't get a proper GPS system. It's still a Garmin bolt-on unit. It's time for that to change.
Absolutely. Let's talk about price.
2023 Honda 1000 R4 Fox live valve starts $25,799. So everything we just said about it being noticeably behind the other rigs, well, it's also priced like a 2019 rig.
Exactly. We live in an age where, earlier we were pricing out a Maverick car, and you ratcheted it up to over $72,000.
Yeah.
You buy a fleet of Honda Talons for that.
Yes, you can. Loaded down with any accessory you want, really.
Yeah.
And if the R is a little too wide for you or a little too sporting for you, step down to the X and you step down $1,000. A 4-seat X comes in at $24,799, and then if you only have 2 of you or there's only 1 of you, you're looking at even cheaper. A 1000R live valve 2-door is $23,499, and then another $1,000 off that for the X model. So these are really affordable rigs and really can't be overstated. It's hard to afford a $35,000 side-by-side, let alone justify one. And when you're coming in 15 grand underneath that, you can forgive a lot of sins.
Absolutely. And you've also got to remember that this is a Honda, right? People love buying red because it means something.
Yep.
It's a reliable rig. You're not going to have trouble out of it like you might have some other vehicles.
How many 35,000 mile Honda Africa's twins have you seen?
Yeah, quite a lot.
No valve adjustments, etc. That translates here to the side-by-side world, and again, you don't get that in other side-by-sides. Now, I keep referring to Polaris and Can-Ams as North American rigs, and I kind of want to walk that back a little bit. We should point out that although this is a Honda, it's American-made. They build these things in South Carolina, just a couple hours south of our shop here in Tennessee. So even though it's a Japanese brand, you're getting an American rig.
Yeah, I mean, that plant down there, I think there are like 1,000 people working down there.
Right.
It's a pretty big to-do. Honda says they can turn out around 200,000 side-by-sides a year out of that facility alone. Yep. Honda's not the only company that's doing it, right? Yamaha's got a facility over in Georgia.
Yep.
When we say North American rigs, what we mean is North American parent company.
Either way, you're keeping your dollars within the United States, and there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. So that brings us to who is this rig for? This is your first sport rig.
Yeah.
This is a perfect first sport rig. You don't have to worry about things like a belt. It's not gonna scare you. It's gonna be fun. You're gonna have enough power to have a good time. It's not gonna fall down when it's come up to your first real obstacle.
Right.
And for the most part, it will hang with your buddies who have 200 horsepower rigs. You'll have a good time. So who is this rig for? It's for the guy who has their first sport side-by-side. It is a perfect rig for that. It's comfortable enough. It's low maintenance. It's going to keep up with any of your buddies' rigs for the most part.
Yep.
It is the ideal rig for that. It's also for somebody who has some children.
Yep.
You're going to need a couple of seats for the little ones in the back. Perfect, it's made for that.
Yep.
It might not be for someone who has a little bit more experience in a sport rig. If you're coming from an XP1000 going to a Talon, that's going to be a tough adjustment. Yeah. It's also not for somebody who's trying to put full-grown adults in the back. Yeah. The back is a little on the tight side.
Yeah, you're going to bang your knees into the back of the seat. That's a perfect place to put kids or teenagers. Yeah. Let them experience off-roading from the safety of the back seat first. And then when it is time for them, when they turn 16 or 17 and it's time for them to experience the side-by-side from the driver's seat, Honda Talon's got you. While the Honda Talon is pretty basic from the factory, there are so many accessories you can buy from Honda. Aftermarket support is huge. You can bolt 32-inch tires right to it. If you have a Can-Am in your garage already, the bolt pattern swaps over. So if you've got wheels for something like a Can-Am, you can slap them right on there, and that jumps the capability up immensely. We put 32s on a 2021 Honda Talon, and we're shocked by immediately how much better it was without touching the suspension. So yes, it's a great first sport rig, but it's a great first sport rig because it can be your second sport rig and maybe your third, depending on how deep you want to go into modifying it.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up modification. If you're somebody who likes to make a rig your own, there is absolutely nothing wrong with jumping into a Honda Talon because the aftermarket support is absolutely wild. There are guys who will sell you a forced induction system. There are guys who will sell you a wild suspension to make this thing keep up with anything that Polaris or Can-Am's turn out.
Absolutely, and then it's yours. You can tune it however you want it. You don't have to undo work that a factory did. You're building from the ground up with a Talon.
But you might want to wait until after a year because this thing comes with a full 1-year manufacturer warranty.
That is wild, especially for a rig that is known for reliability the way a Honda is. We hope you don't have to use it, but the likelihood of coming up against that is pretty slim.
Yeah, I mean, 1 year is pretty long for the industry.
Yep, yeah, and I mean, you can beat on a rig pretty good in a year.
Absolutely.
So you're covered. That's it for everything you need to know on the 2023 Honda Talon 1000R4. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, 7 days a week. You don't want to miss any of that action. And then check us out on utvdriver.com 5 days a week for news, reviews, and nonsense. We're there all the time. We'd love to catch you there. All right, with all the news about the 2024 Can-Am Maverick R coming out, we figured it was time to take a look at the side... Just knock all that shit off now. just sweep the helmet rack. Welcome to Behind the Scenes with UTV Driver.